In 1989, George H.W. Bush was sworn in as America's 44th president. Communist governments were collapsing across the globe, and Richard C. Leone took the helm of the Century Foundation, a progressive policy research institution.
I recommended Dick Leone to be president of this organization many years ago.
When Dick came, it became just an extraordinary place.
Dick was the leader who brought it from the publishing business into the think tank world while still preserving this kind of boldness of ideas.
William F. Buckley used to like to say he was standing athwart history yelling stop. And I think in a lot of ways Dick was doing that during this conservative era.
The late Theodore Sorensen, who served on Century's board for 26 years and as its chair for 5 years, said this of Dick Leone: "He was the finest, most progressive leader of the Century Foundation and its predecessor, the 20th Century Fund, in all my decades as a member of that distinguished board."
Ted had a long and abiding friendship with Dick. He had great respect for Dick's intellect, for his dedication to these progressive values, which of course they shared.
I don't know anyone who understands public policy as well as Dick does.
That was part of his attachment to the Century, Dick's leadership and their common cause in that way.
I haven't met very many people who had that kind of thorough understanding of how politics worked and who understood the major domestic policies of our time.
If you look back at the work that the Century Foundation and then the 20th Century Fund did back in the 1990s, a lot of the issues we were calling attention to then were issues that weren't on the radar screen and in many respects have now since then come home to roost, and everybody recognizes them as significant concerns. Rising wealth inequality, lack of economic mobility, ideological attacks against Social Security.
Social Security.
Under Mr. Leone's leadership, the Century Foundation played a significant role in the fight against Social Security privatization.
Dick was able to keep a focus on these issues like Social Security and Medicaid and education.
Beginning in the 1990s, Senior Fellow Richard Kallenberg provided leadership in looking at innovative ideas to close the achievement gap. Ideas that were new then, but now are in the forefront of education reform.
Dick's idea was that I could bring a point of view that is not often expressed, but it happens to be consistent with what Rick Kallenberg believes about the problems in education.
The New Federalist Papers, Dick had the idea, we all wrote essays about what public policy should be like.
Well, after the 2000 election debacle with the Florida recount, the Supreme Court deciding who would become president, Dick right away led us in an effort to create a commission that would look at the problems with the election system. It was co-chaired by Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, and the recommendations that that group came out with ended up to a large extent being adopted in the Help America Vote Act. Another example, after 9/11, Dick led a range of efforts that we pursued to look at challenges connected to strengthening our homeland security capabilities. We involved a wide array of experts to look at many aspects of those challenges. And we also published a volume that was really the first book-length effort to look at civil liberties challenges post 9/11 and raise concern about those. And that was really, as it turned out, one of the most successful publications that we ever did. So all the time, Dick was urging us on to say, look, we can't just be staid and just do things the way we've always done them. We've got to respond to real-world circumstances and have an impact. And I think the track record on that is clear that we have.
Dick Leone's career as a champion of progressive ideology can be traced back to his days as a student in the Woodrow Wilson School.
In our second year at the Woodrow Wilson School, he was like an intern in the governor's office in New Jersey who was running for re-election. And Dick was interested in campaigns and politics, and that was right there. And shortly before we graduated, he was offered a job in the governor's office. Dick was there for what turned out to be almost the equivalent for New Jersey of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in terms of the character of the changes which took place, the number of them and the magnitude of them. And he was at the center of that as sort of the switchboard on policy. At the age of 25 or 26 or 27 or whatever we were, Dick Leone was the campaign manager in New Jersey for Robert Kennedy when he ran for president. I was the deputy campaign manager.
Dick Leone held leadership roles in the national presidential campaigns of George McGovern, Edmund Muskie, and Walter Mondale.
I don't remember that we worked for a winner.
I think I met him at the time that he wanted to be the United States Senator, and so did Bill Bradley the same year, and that was tough competition.
Dick becomes the campaign manager for Brendan Byrne. And I think he was maybe 31 or 2 at the time. And when Byrne named him the state treasurer, which is a very powerful constitutional position in New Jersey, the politicians were not happy. And it meant, you know, their cousin who was at Merrill Lynch wasn't going to get the state investment account like they thought, that kind of thing, because Leone was going to put it out to qualified bidders.
Dick Leone was part of then Governor-elect John Corzine's transition team, and was the first interview. You had to get past Leone to even be taken a little bit seriously. And he's a pretty intimidating guy in the business world and in the political world as well, the public policy world in New Jersey, and came to be a friend and supporter.
Every few months or so, Dick Leone, Arthur Schlesinger, and Ted Sorensen would have lunch to talk over the state of affairs in the country.
They would talk about everything, about politics, of course, and policy, and all the events of the world. And usually they would be long, lingering lunches because the company was so good and the intellectual discussion was so interesting. And he would often recount to me afterwards how much he enjoyed that. Meg and Dick have a wonderful young son who Ted met many times and was quite attached to. And occasionally they would share poems or jokes or stories, and Ted took great pleasure in that.
To have his daughter be the advisor to the majority leader, first Tom Daschle and now Harry Reid.
Kate Leone, she has been such a stalwart in helping me work through these issues. We started this a number of months ago. Every week we got together because I didn't know a lot about healthcare. And she and I would sit and talk for an hour every week. So I became more accomplished in knowing at least the framework of this legislation that we look forward to dealing with. I have so much appreciation for her.
Kate's in the room. She's in the room when all of this is being hammered out. I mean, that's where all of us who are interested in public policy want to be in. Now, wouldn't that make you feel pretty proud if you were the father of Kate Leone? Wow.
I went to Woodrow Wilson, and Dick both received his master's degree and I believe the first doctorate issued by the Woodrow Wilson School. And so in this sort of hothouse place of policy wonks, I mean, I had classmates whose computer password was senator. It gives you a sense of what the place was like. Dick was a public policy deity, right? He mastered the art of analysis, of framing the idea for action, of sort of being the executor of it in public leadership roles. So he was sort of what we were training to be. And so, of course, I knew him, and of course, he did not know me. And then in the early 1990s, I had worked for a colleague of Dick's, Stan Bresnoff, and it was about 1992. It was an event at the World Trade Center, and Dick Leone was there. And of course, I knew what he looked like, and I saw him from across the room, and I had this like, oh my God, it's Dick Leone. And I avoided him because I was intimidated by him. And at some point during the reception, he walked toward me, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, I have nothing of interest to say to this person. He's, what I, hope sometime to sort of be able to sort of begin to approach in terms of accomplishment. And I thought, and he's walking up to me. What does he want? And then I realized I was blocking the doorway for him. So he said, the door? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. And I quickly sort of moved out of the way. And that was the first time I met Dick Leone.
One of the things that Dick frequently said throughout the nearly 20 years that we worked together is that we should try to think like Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, who always said you should go to where the puck is going to be, not where it is right now.
As small as it is, Century Foundation, Dick believed, still believes, that the Century Foundation should be making an impact on the world. And I think that's his legacy. He transformed the Century Foundation.
The phrase I associate most with Dick is intellectual integrity. He really feels strongly that anything that we produce needs to be backed by careful research, be well argued. Even as we've adapted from what was once a publisher of primarily academic books to one that now is entered the internet age, and we do all kinds of new formats and changing the ways we present information. We retain that, I think, intellectual rigor and care to make sure that the information we're putting out is correct and fairly presented. So we've evolved a great deal over the course of Dick's tenure, but throughout that period of time, we've retained, I believe, the institution's long-standing reputation for providing quality analysis and work.
Dick was sort of something of a deity when I was a public policy student, and this was an institution that everybody I knew in my world sort of knew and admired, and it was sort of this beacon of progressive thought. And when I sort of think about our centennial, what excites me and inspires me and challenges me, and I hope my colleagues, is that when in 8 years, when we are 100 years old, everyone will say that the Century Foundation is a jewel of progressive thought.